Have you ever stopped to think that choosing yourself might be the most controversial and transformative decision of your life? But believe me, putting yourself first isn't selfish. It's a quiet revolution against everything you were taught. Picture an immediate reward, freedom, authenticity, and a life that actually makes sense. But beware, this choice will challenge deep-rooted beliefs and upset those who once benefited from your compliance. Are you ready to find out what happens when you stop living for others and start living for yourself? Stick with me until the end of this video, because today I'm going to show you what really happens when you prioritize yourself. And I promise, by the time we're done, you'll never see your relationships the same way again. There comes a moment in everyone's life when an unavoidable choice appears. Keep living according to other people's expectations, or finally put yourself first. For many, this moment doesn't arrive peacefully. It shows up wrapped in crisis, accumulated frustration, and the unsettling realization that years were wasted trying to live up to standards that were never truly yours. Choosing yourself isn't an act of selfishness, as many would have you believe. On the contrary, it's a sign of emotional maturity. It's that moment when you realize the only validation that truly matters comes from within. But this decision comes at a price, and that's why so many resist making it at first. The change seems simple. You decide to stop saying yes to commitments that don't make sense, start setting boundaries, and prioritize what really matters. But soon, resistance shows up. Those who always benefited from your compliance start questioning you. Why have you changed? What's going on with you? You're so different now. The truth is, the problem was never your change. It's that your new stance no longer serves them. Carl Jung described this phase as the beginning of individuation, the awakening to who you truly are, free from social masks. For years, you wore a carefully crafted persona to be accepted and loved. Now, as you shed those layers, you begin to see a version of yourself that's been hidden all along. But that discovery isn't exactly comfortable. For a while, doubt might creep in. Am I going too far? Am I actually being selfish? These thoughts are echoes of old social programming that taught you it's wrong to put yourself first. But think about it. Why should taking care of yourself be a mistake? Why is prioritizing your own well-being seen as an act of rebellion? The answer is simple. The world got used to seeing you as a resource, someone always available, always willing to meet external demands without question. When you choose yourself, that dynamic shifts, and not everyone handles that well. This is where the real challenge begins. Staying firm in your decision to prioritize yourself takes strength, because it means facing the possibility of losing connections and reevaluating everything built on the need for approval. But it's also the beginning of something powerful, a life where you're the main character, not just a supporting role in someone else's story. The transformation is only beginning, but before we understand the consequences of this choice, we need to look back and understand how we got here. After all, what made us believe that our happiness should always come second? Why do so many people go through life erasing themselves just to please others? Why do we become hostages to external validation, sacrificing our own desires and identity in the name of acceptance? The answer isn't just in our personal choices. It's in a deep social conditioning that starts in childhood and follows us through life. From a young age, we learn that in order to be loved, we must meet others' expectations. First, we seek approval from our parents, who teach us that good kids obey and don't question. Then we try to fit in at school, where we learn that following rules and adapting to the group is the only way to avoid exclusion. By the time we reach adulthood, the pattern is even stronger. In work, in relationships, in social interactions, we're constantly taught that pleasing others is safer than being authentic. But there's a twist. Some thinkers argue that this adaptation process starts too early and ends up stealing something essential: our individuality. Friedrich Nietzsche, one of the most powerful critics of conformist society, put it bluntly: the individual was forced to become calculable, regular, and necessary so that a predictable society could be possible. What did Nietzsche mean by that? That society doesn't want authentic individuals. It wants predictable, controllable people. From childhood, we're shaped to follow rules, not to think for ourselves. This need for acceptance shapes our persona, a central concept in Carl Jung's psychology. The persona is the mask we wear to present ourselves to the world, adapting our behavior to be accepted. It's not inherently bad, it's necessary for social interaction. The problem begins when we become so identified with this mask that we forget who we truly are. Many people spend their entire lives confusing their persona with their real identity. They live to meet external expectations, silently accumulate frustration, and avoid any behavior that might trigger disapproval. The fear of being judged or rejected keeps them trapped in roles that were imposed on them. The dedicated professional who never says no, the always available friend, the partner who sacrifices their dreams just to keep the relationship going. The trap of this cycle is that it never ends. The more you give, the more people expect from you, and ironically, the more you try to please, the less genuine recognition you receive. Because deep down, those who erase themselves to be accepted are rarely truly valued. They're taken for granted, seen as someone who will always be there no matter how overwhelmed they feel. This social conditioning creates a dangerous paradox. The more you sacrifice for others, the further you drift from yourself. That's why so many people feel lost, unsure of what they truly want from life. They've spent so long being what others wanted them to be, they forgot who they really are. Jean-Paul Sartre, one of France's greatest philosophers, expressed this reality in a brutally honest way. Man is condemned to be free because once thrown into the world, he is responsible for everything he does. At first glance, that may sound contradictory, but Sartre reminds us of something essential. We are the only ones responsible for our existence. The problem is that, most of the time, we don't want that responsibility. It's more comfortable to follow a pre-written script, obey norms, and walk a predictable path. Choosing yourself demands a level of awareness and courage that many avoid because it means taking full control of your own life. So what happens when someone decides to break free from that cycle? The first impact is shock. People notice the change and respond with discomfort. After all, if you were always available, always the one who adapted to avoid conflict, your new attitude might be seen as wrong or selfish. But there's nothing wrong with this transformation. The problem is that your new stance unsettles those who are used to seeing you as someone without boundaries. And then comes the big question. If choosing yourself means breaking with this social programming, how do you face the transition? Life can follow a predictable script for a long time. You get used to your routines, maintain your relationships, and accept certain obligations without question. But then something starts to shift. Small annoyances become more noticeable, empty conversations feel even more superficial, commitments that were once tolerable start to weigh you down. That feeling that something is off begins to grow. That's the moment of awakening. For some, it hits suddenly, an emotional crisis, a major disappointment, or mental burnout. For others, it arrives quietly through a persistent discomfort that builds over time. Either way, once that moment comes, there's no going back. And this is where the first internal resistance appears. Our mind tries to justify the dissatisfaction with excuses like, maybe I'm overreacting. I can't just throw everything away now. Things aren't perfect, but at least they're safe. These aren't just excuses, they're clear signs of the persona trying to stay in control. Questioning your life means threatening that structure, and the initial instinct is to resist change. But here's the problem. Once the truth is seen, it can't be unseen. You might try to convince yourself that everything's fine, but deep down, you know it's not. The biggest obstacle here is guilt. When you start putting yourself first, you feel the weight of years of conditioning. Suddenly, saying no feels wrong, prioritizing your well-being sounds selfish. The desire for change clashes directly with the fear of disappointing others. But that guilt isn't real. It's a social construct designed to keep people in predictable roles. Jung said much of our psyche is formed by unconscious elements inherited from culture, which teach us to believe we only have value when we're serving others. Choosing yourself means challenging that belief, and that inevitably brings discomfort and the dreaded confrontation with the shadow. Jung spoke of the shadow, the hidden part of our psyche that holds everything we've repressed. At the moment of awakening, the shadow rises with full force. It brings doubts, insecurities, even identity crises, but ignoring it only prolongs the pain. The only true path to transformation is to face it. Many people, when they feel that impact, choose to retreat. They try to ignore the internal call and return to the predictable life they know. They tell themselves, that's just how life is. I can't change now, it's too late. But that choice comes at a cost, a silent suffering that drags on for years. For those who choose to move forward, an intense and transformative journey begins. The first step of that journey is redefining your priorities. You start questioning everything. What actually makes me happy? Who am I when I'm not trying to please anyone? What do I do out of obligation? And what do I do because I truly want to? These questions may sound simple, but their answers can be uncomfortable. They reveal how many decisions were driven by fear, how many dreams were left behind to avoid judgment, how many relationships were maintained out of convenience. Awakening doesn't mean instant change. It's not like you suddenly abandon your old life and become a completely different person. The process is gradual and often painful. There are setbacks, moments of doubt, attempts to return to old patterns. But once the truth has been seen, there's no way to keep living in the dark. From that point on, your relationship with others begins to shift. Some people notice your transformation and support your growth. Others, however, feel threatened. When someone chooses to prioritize themselves, those who are used to your submission might react badly. They'll try to make you feel guilty, call you selfish or cold, because they don't know how to handle the new dynamic where you're no longer sacrificing yourself for them. But that's not a sign you're on the wrong path. On the contrary, it's a sign you've finally broken free from social conditioning and started to live more consciously. And here's the big question. Will you give in to the pressure and go back to who you used to be, or will you keep moving forward knowing this journey demands sacrifice? Awakening to your own truth inevitably leads to solitude. The moment you decide to choose yourself, break patterns, and free yourself from external expectations, something happens. Some people drift away, others question your changes, and suddenly you find yourself more alone than ever. But that solitude isn't punishment, it's a portal. Carl Jung saw solitude as a vital stage in the individuation process. It's in silence, away from distractions and outside interference, that we finally hear our own voice. For years, our choices were influenced by others. What to wear, what to say, what opinions to hold, even which dreams to chase. But when we step away from the noise, we get the chance to understand who we truly are. At first, this period can be painful. Solitude forces you to face yourself. No masks, no distractions, no excuses. What was once filled with empty conversation, social obligations, and unnecessary commitments now becomes a void, and the void can be terrifying. Society sees solitude as a problem. We're taught that being alone is a sign of failure. From childhood, we're encouraged to always be surrounded by others. If someone chooses to spend time alone, people worry, are they okay? As if constant company were the only legitimate way to exist. But that view is flawed. Solitude is not isolation. It doesn't mean rejection or abandonment. It's a sacred space for reconstruction, a time for realignment where you detach from external voices and learn to trust yourself. Many avoid this moment out of fear of what they'll find when all distractions are stripped away. There's only you and your truth, and that truth can be uncomfortable. In solitude, old wounds resurface, suppressed fears appear, long ignored internal questions demand answers. This is a crucial moment. You either face your shadows or numb yourself with distractions again. Jung once said, loneliness does not come from having no people around, but from being unable to communicate the things that seem important to you. That means real loneliness isn't about lacking company, it's about lacking genuine connection. How many times have you felt alone even in a crowd? That's because so many of our interactions are surface level, based on social convention rather than true understanding. When you step into solitude, you begin to see which relationships were real and which only existed because you were playing a role. That's when a natural detachment occurs. You realize you no longer need others' approval to validate your existence. This inner shift is liberating, but it can also be painful. Many experience what's called social grief, the sorrow of realizing certain relationships were never as deep as they seemed. But there's a hidden gift in that grief. It clears space for new connections, this time based on your authentic self. When used properly, solitude not only frees you, it strengthens you. Many great minds throughout history went through periods of isolation before reaching profound revelations. Nietzsche, Jung, Thoreau, Buddha, Jesus, they all understood that deep self-knowledge requires stepping away from the external world. Antoine de Saint-Exupéry, the French author of The Little Prince, also understood this process. In Wind, Sand, and Stars, he wrote, "He who is lost in his solitude discovers what truly matters." That line holds a powerful truth. When you allow yourself to enter solitude, you discover what really has value and what was just noise. You realize many of your past worries were just reflections of others' expectations. But here's the key. Solitude must be a path to growth, not an escape from the world. Some people, after tasting the clarity of solitude, begin to retreat completely from human interaction. They isolate not to grow stronger, but to protect themselves from the pain of difficult relationships. That's risky because extreme isolation can lead to disconnection from the world and emotional shutdown. The secret is balance. Use solitude as a space to rebuild, not a permanent refuge. It should serve to strengthen your identity, not to create a wall between you and others. When used wisely, solitude becomes a power. It teaches you to feel whole without external validation. It brings clarity to your choices and prepares you to engage with the world in a more authentic and conscious way. But what happens next? The first sign that something has changed doesn't come from you, it comes from others. The moment you choose yourself, the world reacts not with applause or admiration. More often than not, the response to your awakening is resistance. At first, it might be subtle, a strange look, a comment that you've changed. But as time goes on, the feedback becomes more pointed. You're not the same. What happened to you? You've changed. And the truth is, you have. But the issue isn't your transformation, it's that your change forces others to confront why they haven't changed. Human beings cling to patterns. We build emotional routines and relationships based on predictable roles. Every group has its cast, the listener, the helper, the self-sacrificing, the one who never complains. But when someone steps out of their assigned role, the whole dynamic shifts. And that's exactly what happens when you start prioritizing yourself. Those who were used to seeing you as the available one, the reliable one, the always there for everyone one, now face a new version of you. One that sets boundaries, one that says no, one that refuses roles once accepted without hesitation. And that makes people uncomfortable, not because they want to see you suffer, but because the old dynamics served them. Some will quietly drift away. Others will try to pull you back into your old role. But there's a third group, the hardest to deal with, those who feel personally attacked by your growth. They'll say you've become selfish, distant, cold, that you only think about yourself. But what they're really saying is, I preferred it when you put my needs above your own. Others will mock your journey, call you too spiritual, too individualistic, too radical. But behind that mockery lies fear, the fear that if you're right, they might have to admit they've been wrong all along. And then there are those who say nothing, but you feel the resentment, a shift in tone, a bit of emotional distance, conversations that no longer flow. You become a living reminder of what they wish they had the courage to do. The true social shock isn't just in losing a few connections. It's realizing that many of them were never as deep as you thought, and that hurts. You begin to see that some bonds were held together only by your one-sided effort, that some people didn't love you, they loved what you did for them. That realization stings, but it's also freeing. Because in the midst of the chaos and the distance of some, the discomfort of others, you realize something. The people who truly matter stay. Maybe they're confused, maybe they ask questions, but they stay. They don't try to pull you back, they don't guilt you, they simply accept that you're changing and respect your process. And those are the people you want beside you. One of the biggest mistakes during an awakening is trying to hold on to those who are already slipping away, trying to explain too much, justify too much, convince too much. But not everyone is ready to understand. Not everyone can accept your transformation without feeling threatened, and that's okay. What separates the ones who stay from the ones who leave isn't how close they were in the past, it's whether they can grow with you. Some will rise with you, others will stay behind. And it's not your job to drag them into the new space you now inhabit. The greatest trap in this moment is the fear of rejection. Humans are social by nature, we're wired to seek acceptance. So when we begin to feel the first signs of distance, the instinct is to pull back, to give in, to reshape ourselves into who we used to be just so things can feel normal again. But is it really worth sacrificing your truth to hold on to people who only accept you as long as you fit into the frame they built? Carl Jung once said, "Loneliness does not mean being alone, but being surrounded by people who do not understand you." And that's the real test of awakening. Would you rather live in genuine solitude where your authenticity is intact, or in a crowd where you constantly have to betray yourself? The choice was never about others. It was always about you, about who you decide to be, regardless of whether